From sleeping on cardboard in the streets of Manila to becoming one of the greatest champions in boxing history, Manny Pacquiao's journey is almost impossible to believe. Came from extreme poverty, fought his way to worldwide fame, won world championships across an unprecedented 8 weight divisions, earned hundreds of millions of dollars, and became a national hero in the Philippines. But life outside the boxing ring was far more complicated. As his fame and fortune grew, Pacquiao faced legal battles, financial pressure, political setbacks, broken relationships, and personal struggles. The same man who spent decades building an extraordinary empire eventually found himself fighting battles that couldn't be solved with a pair of boxing gloves. This is the story of Manny Pacquiao's incredible rise, and the struggles that followed. There are different levels of poverty, and some are difficult for most people to imagine. This wasn't simply about having less money or being unable to afford luxuries. It was the kind of poverty where hunger became part of everyday life, and survival came before dreams. Manny Pacquiao was born Emmanuel Dapadran Pacquiao on December 17, 1978, in Cubao, Bukidnon, Philippines. He grew up in a large family with 6 children, where even basic necessities were difficult to afford. According to accounts of his childhood, the family's situation became so desperate that his father reportedly killed and ate the family dog because there was nothing else available for food. Pacquiao's childhood took place far away from the glamorous image many people associate with the Philippines. In parts of Mindanao, families weren't thinking about luxury or comfort. Their biggest concern was simply finding enough food to make it through another day. Things became even harder when Manny's parents separated after his father became involved with another woman. His mother, Dionysia, was suddenly left to raise 6 children with very limited resources. There was no financial safety net waiting for the family. No reliable support system. Every day brought another struggle to survive. Manny began working while he was still very young. He sold bread on the streets, collected recyclable materials, and took whatever small jobs he could find to bring money home. His childhood disappeared quickly because poverty didn't give him the freedom to simply be a child. Eventually, staying in school became impossible. His family needed money more than they needed another student in the classroom. Pacquiao dropped out of school during 6th grade, choosing survival over education. There was no guaranteed future waiting for him. No backup plan. His only objective was to somehow make it through the next day. Then, at just 12 years old, Manny made a decision that would completely change his life. With almost nothing to his name and very few opportunities available to him, he left home to pursue boxing, traveled to General Santos City, and stayed with his uncle, Sardo Mejia. Although his uncle wasn't a professional boxing coach, he became one of the first people to train the young Pacquiao. The environment was extremely basic. There were no expensive trainers, modern boxing facilities, advanced equipment, or professional recovery programs. Everything depended on hard work, determination, and raw talent. Yet somewhere inside that struggling young boy was a fighter who would eventually become a global superstar. The skinny teenager who once sold bread just to help his family survive was slowly transforming into a boxer with extraordinary speed, aggression, and determination. Pacquiao had none of the advantages that modern fighters often receive. There were no luxury training centers, elite coaching teams, nutrition specialists, or sophisticated sports science programs. Instead, he trained with basic equipment, worn-out gloves, and whatever facilities were available. But his talent couldn't stay hidden for long. By the age of 15, Pacquiao had already developed a reputation as one of the most dangerous young fighters in the Philippines. Competed in public parks around General Santos City, where fights were rough, unpredictable, and often far removed from the organized boxing events fans see today. These weren't glamorous amateur tournaments. Crowds gathered around the fighters, bets were placed, and competitors fought for whatever small amounts of money they could earn afterward. Those brutal early experiences helped create the style that would eventually make Pacquiao famous around the world. He developed relentless pressure, lightning-fast combinations, explosive movement, and a mentality that refused to back down. But Manny also understood something important. If he wanted to become a serious professional boxer, General Santos City could only take him so far. He needed to reach Manila, so, while still a teenager, Pacquiao secretly boarded a ship headed toward the Philippine capital. It was an enormous gamble, had no wealthy sponsors, no powerful connections, and no guarantee that anyone in Manila would even give him a chance. Was simply betting everything on the possibility of a better future. Manila represented opportunity, but it was also a place where countless young dreamers had arrived and failed. When Pacquiao finally reached the city, the reality was brutal. Had no proper home, slept on flattened pieces of cardboard on sidewalks and in hidden corners of the city, using building entrances and whatever shelter he could find to protect himself from weather. The streets became his bedroom. Survival meant taking whatever work was available and the mornings. He sold donuts to workers and commuters for small amounts of money, also cleaned local boxing gyms, sweeping floors and washing equipment. In return, he was sometimes allowed to train. Every day was a battle between staying alive and pursuing his dream. He only around 14 years old. Pacquiao was living in Manila with almost nothing, took construction jobs, struggled to afford meals, and constantly had to make impossible choices. Sometimes he had to decide whether the little money he earned should be used to feed himself or sent back home so his mother and family could eat. And on some days, he chose his family over himself. That sacrifice would become one of the defining characteristics of Manny Pacquiao's life. Before the fame, before the championships, before the millions of dollars and worldwide recognition, there was simply a young boy trying to survive. And that boy was willing to suffer almost anything for a chance to change his family's future. Putting his family's needs ahead of his own hunger became part of Manny Pacquiao's reality. Before the fame, championship belts, and enormous fortune, there was sacrifice on a level most people could never understand. Then came the turning point. Just 16 years old, Pacquiao officially entered professional boxing. In January 1995, he made his professional debut as a junior flyweight against Edmund "Enting" Ignacio. Pacquiao won the fight by decision. The money he earned might have looked insignificant by international boxing standards, but to Manny it was life-changing. For the first time, he was earning money through the sport he believed could transform his life. But success didn't come immediately. The road ahead was still dangerous and uncertain. Manny continued fighting, improving and winning, carrying the same determination that had helped him survive on the streets. Then in 1998, everything changed. Just 3 years after turning professional, Pacquiao defeated defending champion Chache Sasacal to capture the WBC Flyweight Championship. Was still barely out of his teenage years, yet Manny Pacquiao was already a world champion. For the Philippines, the victory was enormous. The young man who had once slept on cardboard in Manila was suddenly standing at the top of the boxing world. Millions of Filipinos began to recognize that they were watching the rise of a future national icon. His story connected with people across the country. Former street kid who had dropped out of school because his family couldn't survive was now standing on the world stage with a championship belt around his waist. For millions of Filipinos facing poverty themselves, Pacquiao became living proof that even the most unlikely dreams could become reality. But success can also create new problems. The same hunger that pushed Pacquiao toward greatness sometimes made him reckless inside the ring. Early in his career, Manny relied heavily on relentless aggression. He attacked without hesitation and often paid little attention to defense, believing that determination and pressure could overcome almost anything. Eventually reality caught up with him, and in 1996, Pacquiao faced Rustico Torrecampo, a fighter who wasn't considered a major threat before the bout. Torrecampo wasn't known as a devastating knockout artist, and many expected Pacquiao to continue his rapid rise. Instead, the fight became one of the first major wake-up calls of Manny's career. After Pacquiao landed several clean punches, Torrecampo found his opening and stopped him just 30 seconds into the third round. It was the first professional loss of Pacquiao's career. For many boxers, losing is simply part of the sport. For Manny, it meant something much deeper. Boxing wasn't merely his passion. It was his escape from poverty. Had no college education, no established career to fall back on, and no financial safety net if boxing failed. Everything he had sacrificed was tied to this dream, so when he lost inside the ring, it felt as if his entire future was suddenly at risk. But Pacquiao refused to stay down, rebuilt his confidence, and went on an incredible winning streak, collecting 15 consecutive victories. During that run, his skills improved dramatically. His confidence returned, and his reputation began spreading throughout the boxing world. Eventually, he defeated Chache Sasacal to capture the WBC Flyweight Championship and officially announced himself as one of boxing's rising stars. Promoters began taking notice. Philippine media started celebrating him as a potential national hero, while fans became fascinated by his fearless fighting style. Pacquiao attacked relentlessly and rarely seemed intimidated by the opponents standing across from him. It looked like everything was finally coming together. Then another devastating setback arrived, and in 1999, Pacquiao defended his title against Medgon Singsurat, an undefeated fighter who entered the matchup with a perfect record. Both men were young, hungry, and determined to prove they belonged among boxing's elite. The fight was supposed to strengthen Manny's position as champion. Instead, disaster struck again. For the second time in his young career, Pacquiao was stopped in the third round. This time, the consequences were even greater. Lost his world championship less than a year after winning it. Once again, the fighter who had risen from poverty was staring directly at failure. What made the defeat even more surprising was Pacquiao's strong start, controlled the early action with speed, pressure, and constant combinations. But then everything suddenly changed. Troubling pattern had begun to appear. Manny could start a fight like a storm, overwhelming opponents with relentless attacks. Yet one mistake could completely change the outcome. One perfectly timed punch could erase everything. For most young fighters, suffering 2 knockout losses before the age of 22 could destroy a promising career. Many fighters never recover from setbacks like that. But Manny Pacquiao was different. Didn't disappear, he adapted, recovered. And then he made a decision that would eventually change boxing history. Pacquiao began moving up in weight. For most fighters, moving up even one division can be dangerous. Opponents become naturally bigger and stronger, while the advantages that once made a fighter dominant can disappear. Many champions avoid that risk altogether. Pacquiao did the opposite. He moved up. Then he won, he moved up again. And he kept winning. Soon, the boxing world realized it was witnessing something extraordinary. Different divisions brought bigger opponents, different styles, and different challenges. Yet Pacquiao repeatedly found ways to succeed. The championship belts continued to pile up. Over an extraordinary 25-year career, Pacquiao transformed himself into one of the most accomplished fighters the sport had ever seen. He became the first and only boxer to win recognized world championships in 8 different weight divisions. He also captured lineal championships in 5 divisions and achieved the remarkable distinction of winning world titles across 4 different decades. Achievements like these sound almost impossible. But Pacquiao's success wasn't limited to championship belts. Why 2015? His pay-per-view events had reportedly generated more than $1 billion in revenue. Think about that transformation. This was once a boy sleeping on sidewalks and wondering where his next meal would come from, child who sometimes went hungry so his family could eat. Now, his fights were generating the kind of financial numbers normally associated with massive global entertainment franchises. The transformation was almost unimaginable. And Pacquiao didn't build his legacy by avoiding elite competition. Throughout his career, he faced and defeated many of the biggest names in boxing. He battled world champions, future legends, and elite fighters across multiple weight classes. With every major victory, his reputation grew. Went from a poor Filipino teenager fighting for survival to a global boxing superstar whose name became synonymous with speed, aggression, resilience, and championship greatness. But reaching the top of boxing was only the beginning of Manny Pacquiao's story. The bigger question was what would happen after the money, fame, politics, and worldwide success began changing his life outside the ring.